I have a hard time answering the question about evil because there is such a big gap between how humanity perceives good versus evil and how, even beings in the seventh dimension perceive good and evil, let alone how the higher self perceives good and evil, let alone how source consciousness perceives good and evil. From the perspective of source, everything is an experience. From the perspective of your higher self, everything is a learning opportunity. So they're not so quick at putting a label on a happening, an event, or a circumstance. In fact, they don't like putting the word evil on things. And they don't even perceive that as such. In other words, being murdered by someone and murdering somebody from a perspective of the higher self could be considered all good, right? Depending on the intention. And here is where the core crux of this issue lies. Let's say you're, and again, not stepping back, let's say your higher self wants to understand murder. It's just a fascinating subject for your higher self. If it wants to understand murder, it's going to have to come and incarnate many, many times over. And it wants to experience it from every angle. So your higher self may choose to come as a victim, as the mother of the victim, as the father of the victim, as the teacher of the victim, as the murderer, as the mother of the murderer, yada, 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 yada. As the mayor of the city where the murder happened, as the police head of the police department that was investigating the murder, etc., etc. The judge who was judging the person who committed the murder. And then it's not going to stop from there, right? So let's say it took all of those experiences and feels like it understands murder a little bit better. Then it's going to want to experience murder to a higher degree. For example, well, I know what it feels like to kill one person. What does it feel like to kill 30 people? What does it feel like to kill 100,000? You know what I mean? And is it evil? Not if your intention is to understand murder. Because by the virtue of you understanding murder, you are sharing that learning and you're uploading it up to the Akashic records where everybody else can learn from it. And that is a very important distinction to make. Because at one point, somebody has to be the soul that is going to get the learning of what it feels like for the rest of existence and for the rest of the higher selves and, for source itself, right? So somebody has to take one for the team, so to say, and learn. And that is how you may get like a mass murderer or somebody who starts a world war, or somebody who, blows up a nuke and demolishes a whole city, right? That is one way that you can get there. In this particular instance, right? Again, the intention of your higher self is learning. However, where this becomes problematic, and again, I have a very hard time assigning a label evil to anything below the third dimension. Let's just call it what it is. Because that good versus evil kind of only exists here and below. One thing where this can become a little tricky is this. Let's say your higher self intends to heal people. Healing is its thing that it wants to do. But let's say it descends into this incarnation, gets into the veil of forgetfulness, and instead of healing people, it starts murdering people. Just, for whatever reason. Maybe because there is some drama in the childhood, maybe because they saw a movie where somebody murdered somebody, thought it was cool, so they essentially went off the bandwagon. This is treated a little bit differently because the intention was one, like X, and the outcome was Y, right? That is still, by the way, not considered evil. It's just considered suboptimal because it wasn't planned. Now, is that still learning? Yes. Ultimately, is it still good to learn? Absolutely. However, that is where you get splits at higher self level, right? Because your higher self remembers that it wanted to be a healer, and then it has an aspect of itself that comes back and it's a murderer. And your higher self is like, whoa, what do I do with this? And that's where they create a split or a shadow, right? And then some higher selves may even start perceiving that aspect that they split as evil just because they cannot process it. But is that aspect evil? Not from source perspective, it's not.
So interesting. So
and evil is just a matter of perspective. What's good for one person is evil for another person. And by the way, like, look at Hitler. He's one of the poster children for like being an evil person. Do you know how many millions of souls benefited from learning from the experience that he has created? So here you may put, like, look at a character like him and be like, oh, he's completely evil. And upstairs, his experience was one of the greater, sources of knowledge of 3D planet Earth warfare. And that is benefiting so many different souls on their evolutionary path. So is he evil? Not really. I don't think so.
So interesting. So just it means that some higher selves choose to take this path, and it seems like it's maybe a bit less desirable than other ones because we don't have that many murderers and mass murderers especially, right? But they still choose to do so for their own development.
Well, do you want me to give you an even better example?
Yeah.
Do you think playing World of Warcraft is evil because you're killing things?
Like in a computer game?
Yeah.
People don't think it's evil, yes.
I know. Same logic. It's a computer game from higher self level. Like, fine. Like, I don't know. Any of those RPG games, I think RPG is what they're called, right? Like, where you, like, go and, like, murder, all kinds of beings every which way through Sunday with all kinds of weapons, and you're like, I need this strength and I need this skill and let me have this gun and I want a bigger gun and even more bullets and blah blah blah. I mean, you go in, you may have murdered 1,000 beings on a screen, and then you go on your merry way and nobody's pointing a finger at you at work and being like, this is a mass murderer. But how is that any different? So that's what I'm saying. Like, what we perceive as evil is not the same experience. Now, you as an avatar, right? You as a person who chooses to play a game, you choose what game you want to play, right? Like, you may go and play Candy Crush. You may go and play Frozen on your iPhone, or you may go and play World of Warcraft. And nothing makes you a bad person. All of these are experiences, right? And they serve you as experiences. But playing Candy Crush doesn't make you a better human being because you're not killing anything compared to, killing somebody in the World of Warcraft.
Wow, that's a very different perspective. Yeah, mind-blowing, actually.
Well, I'm glad I get to blow your mind.
Yes. And thank you so much for submitting your questions. And this one was a really good one. Thank you for